maybe we start with you.
Yeah, it was discussed a little bit. Yeah, sure, sounds good. So I'm Sasha Feldica, working within JP Morgan Digital Markets Group, and I focus on a number of things within electronic trading, and I spearhead the AI ML initiatives as a product for our sales group, meaning all the tooling that our salespeople have that use AI and LLM. I manage that from a product perspective. The questions was a little bit, or at least the angle of this panel was a little less on, hey, this is LLM, these are the new advances that we made, but more kind of taking, and that's okay, we can quickly touch on that, but more taking, there's been a lot of talks the last 6 months. How is it relevant to our industry? What are some of the things happening actually across some of the other players? And what are some of the things that we observe in other industries that might, in terms of potential risks, for example, that we need to be aware, and how will they port into our into what we do? That kind of was the angle. So to make it a little bit more concrete, really, to the things that the people within our industries are facing or will face soon. So that's me, and a little bit of spiel on the background of the panel.
Thanks, Sasha. So Ivan, do you want to run it?
So my name is Ivan Smets. I'm running the financial department at Snowflake. So we are data solution providers. We're providing a data infrastructures. I'm not from the industry. We're covering 4 main departments. We're covering the bank, we're covering insurance, we're covering asset management and payment services. What I bring to this is we are in touch with all the bank at the moment and all the systemic bank in France, plus all the assets managers, plus private equity, about we exploring how AI and MLM can transform. And it's much more about what are their concerns in terms of scales and implementation, and what it means for us in terms of technology, what we can provide to make it available today. So I would say that I'm the flip side of what Sasha is trying to do.
Great, thank you. Over to you, Tom.
Hey, I'm Tom Doris. So currently I run Alpha Capture at Carlson Capital. My previous relevant experience would be that I started a data analytics, market data analytics provider called Otes Technologies that provided ML-driven market monitoring tools for traders. My background academically is that I have a PhD in artificial intelligence and computational neuroscience. So I've got some technical background there. I think I probably sit a little bit in the middle of Ivan and Sasha. So, looking at the questions or the topics outlined on the chat, I mean, I think that I'm a long-term optimist, but a short-term skeptic in terms of how much this stuff is going to impact. I think everybody always underestimates how long it takes for new tech to impact. I always go back to the examples of, ERP and CRM systems, the kind of classic, big corporate deployments, both of which kind of it took fully 30 years for them to fully mature. And I think we're about, 10 to 15 years into the machine learning AI equivalent life cycle, and it's going to be a long time before we actually see all of the impact. I like to talk about what we know for sure. I think there's a lot of hyperbolic chat, people talking in their own book about how it's going to take everybody's jobs, which I think is really, a bit puerile and doesn't really help anybody in our industry understand what they need to do next. So I like to talk about things like, what do we know for sure? We know for sure that in many cases, these LLMs are a much better interface to the existing data that we have on the internet. And that the internet has, probably become progressively worse to use over the last 10 years in particular. And I think a lot of people who adopt it and find it very useful are finding it not useful necessarily for the new insider, deductions that it can do, but rather the fact that it's just a much cleaner interface to the information we have on places like Wikipedia and a whole bunch of other data stores that are out there. So that's kind of my broad-based position. I always think that people overhype the potential applications of, it was the same when ML and data science came in, overhyped the potential applications within execution algorithms, and this idea that these things can run amok. Well, that's always been the case. Ask anybody who used to work for Knight Capital. We were capable of making things run amok with very simple algos in the past, and we will be in future as they become more sophisticated. So that's kind of my position in general.
And I can complement a little bit of what Tom is saying. I think my view is one that I think the hype is justified, because I think vis-a-vis what we had before, and Tom, myself can also speak about previous iterations on how AI was used within finance, right? So there were models that were used for a number of things, whether executing trades or providing insights, quite specific, much smaller. I think that the difference and the excitement and the hype is the fact that with GPT being given to the masses, now you've got something that is way more powerful, that potentially has much more capabilities than these previous models, right? But the thing is that what I'm finding by applying this technology in the firm is that there's many things that you gotta consider that percolate through the hype, right? First thing is, how secure, for example, is the data you put in through some of these models to get trained and then to use them, right? And that's definitely a consideration for us, and that is, the first thing that we gotta consider. The second thing is that these things are enormously expensive as well to train. So, is it worth replacing a model that has worked well for a specific task that has been implemented over time in a firm with one of these? It really depends. You gotta ask that question. The kit that you deploy to support, train, and have these models gotta justify the outcome. So it's not just, hey, let's just use LLM for everything. It just doesn't work that way. So you need to be quite nuanced as to how to use it. And then I think actually vis-a-vis what's happening out there, and I think one of the questions that talks about, what are some of the issues that we need to consider. I think it is important to think about those overall in the use on LLM and how they are progressing. But I do think that regulated firms are actually, fun enough, there's going to be different things to think about when regulating and controlling LLM and AI apply to our industry. But we are overall I think in a better place than, let's say, movie industry, right, which is not a regulated industry, to potentially apply frameworks that we used to have it regulated, that we used before, so long as obviously what the regulation will target in the case of AI and LLM goes after the right thing. So I think from that perspective, fun enough, we might have a competitive advantage when it comes to regulating AI and how it's used in a safely manner vis-a-vis other industry. That's my view.
I fully agree with both of you and can provide the sum of what you said in what you have. What do we observe as a platform provider supporting both ML and both LLM? The good thing is LLM has raised the interest on the technology and the data and raised to executive and create a buzzword. So there's a lot of people, especially for industry, what can it change for us and what it drives. So we can see that everybody at the moment is looking first, what are the use cases for which personas in my organization? What do I bring for front office, middle office, back office? What does it mean? Does it help to do something new? Does it help to automate and get operational efficiency? What's the impact? And at the moment, there is a driver, which is cost. So how we can help to drive efficiency, automate some stuff, or help to do things that we've never done before. So this is a big drivers. On the other side, we see, as you said, that there's a hype, there's many obstacles that still need to be tackled. We have listed that. We have a question of ethics. the regulator is asking, okay, are there any bias or are there any risk if you use an LLM to make an advice, a recommendation on a trade, and what will be the impact? We have questions about confidentiality, how we are sure that the data, the people access through the LLM to the right data and not data who are sensible, how we are sure that we are not exiting data from our internal to the external back to the internet. There is a lot of question about accuracy. What's the accuracy of an LLM if we want to use it, for example, for trading or for advice? There's question of hallucination. There's question of repeatability. If we ask the same question, do we get exactly the same answer? So there's a question on the technological side. We don't have tools to evaluate how much or in ranking of how much an LLM is trained or not. We're not able to test this. So we're still developing tools to be able to evaluate, should I train more my model to be accurate or not? We have a big question with, at the moment, it's under-evaluated, but it's the carbon footprints of this LLM. If you compare that to previous ML and previous database before, it's more 1,000 times GPU are consuming 1,000 times more power systems and all that stuff to run. So there is a high impact on environment. We have a lot of questions about the regulation coming, AI Act, and especially in the financial services, we have a lot of questions about, does the regulator is mature enough, have the skill to understand what's going on and regulate on the right timeline? So sometimes we are ahead of what is authorized, but the regulator is really looking in depth when it talks about data, about what are you doing, what are you planning to do. We have a big question of intellectual property. So when we train the model and we put in the data are coming from internet, there is a question of accuracy. We talk about Wikipedia. So if we train a model and make an analysis of a situation, is it possible? Is the data accurate? Do we have the intellectual property to use it and to train our model? And that's roughly, that's already good enough. But these are what we observe in terms of what are the break and the question we need to cover. And the big question then is, we are in the experimentation phase with many of the bank or the buy side or sell side industry. There's also a question, when we have validated that it's good, how do we scale? At an economic standpoint, because today it costs a lot in terms of people, in terms of infrastructures and time to deliver a valuable use case. So tomorrow, how we can get that to everybody in the organization at an acceptable cost.
Yeah, and that's what I think, you know, being nuanced about what you use it for, it's important, right? Because you might really don't need to apply LLM for something that's your previously quite efficient and optimized algorithm as worse, right? Now, that doesn't mean that you don't have to, for example, from our perspective, that doesn't mean that we don't have to experiment and play into the space. We do see it as a firm, as you know, as an important element of how we evolve. But again, it's been nuanced as to how that is addressed. And I don't believe that, you know, as we're coming from Tom anyway, anytime soon, you know, this thing will completely replace humans, or we've seen this before, right? We've seen it before in again, we can point to experiences within our industry, highly automated markets. You know, they still have people. It's just different sets of skills that people have with quants or, you know, sales traders in equities that are a lot more analytical because they watch over algos, for example. So it's different type of skills, right? As you develop these algos that I think people will need to work alongside, right?
Yeah, I think I'd add to that, Sacha. It's a great observation that, you know, some people might point to kind of what happened to sell side, you know, support desks quite a while ago now, I guess from 15 to 5 years ago, where they went from, you know, hundreds of people down to a dozen or fewer. But the real story there wasn't that they were automated out of existence. It was just that the intelligence went to the buy side. So the buy side is going to become increasingly intelligent, maybe one of the effects of these technologies will be that you'll rely even less on the sell side, because you can have your LLM, parse the 100 or so, regulatory filings, the earnings call transcripts, and then interrogate it and get what you used to get from, your sales coverage on the sell side or analysts on the sell side. So I think it plays into the hands of the more sophisticated buy side, technology-driven firms, which are now, already the behemoths on the buy side and in the market in general.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. Not that we will become irrelevant as a sell side players, but that what's happened is that you move up the food chain, right, as to what you provide as a content to your clients.
Yeah, you have to match their sophistication, right? And that's you're not certainly not. I'm not preaching irrelevance, but I think
no, exactly.
It's an evolution that's been going on for a long time.
It's an evolution, right? So and we can play. So in the case that Tom said, right, passing and getting key insights from the analyst. I agree. You got an ECDAT SEC database that you can scrape and get that, and get the summarization translations through LLM. It's a very valid use case for SEC findings. So the game will be, for example, a sell side provider providing much more unique insights, also generated by their own LLM aggregator, right, or trade idea generation. But I can see that happening, right? I can see that happening, and again, in another way, you can point to the experience that we've seen with execution algos across FX or across equities. That's what happened, right? You move across the chain of services that you provide. It's expensive though, so I think Tom hits a good point, and I think I want to stress that. He mentioned it plays to the hands of the most sophisticated and tech savvy buy side. So I think that also it's an important point for the buy side to be aware of, right? It's a game that they need to really embrace, because otherwise they might lose out on that opportunity. So that's something to take note.
Yeah.
What you're saying is super interesting on the chain, because what we have seen so far and what we have in terms of AI and ML, from a technological standpoint, we're leveraging data which are already in database, which are numerical values and what we call the structured data. What we have in the patrimonial of almost every company is on the unstructured data, the text, the PDF, the PowerPoint, which is today is not fully leveraged, because when you want to make the research, you need to do it manually. What the LLM are opening is the opportunity to automatically scan all those documents, extract insight, and pre-aggregate some stuff. So we have, there was a question about what we can learn from other fields. We did that with an experimentation with the biggest private equity in France. And they say to build the analysis for our LPs, it takes ages to go and gather the information across all our documents. So we use LLM to ingest all those documents. We build the prompt for our portfolio managers and sales guys. They just put the question in an Excel file, they upload it to the LLM, and the LLM go chase all those information across all the documents and pre-aggregate and pre-build something that we review. And it helps us to save time, and it opens up the opportunity to leverage data that in the past was obligatory. When you mentioned the generating more insights on the buy side, it's exactly what they're looking at. The LLM opened the doors of leveraging this patrimonial of unstructured data. And that's, I think it's not going to replace, it's going to complement or help to do the things faster. And then we can focus on, okay, what I do from this information, pre-aggregating information to generate insights for recommendation.
That's really interesting. Ivan, so I was chatting with a friend about this, and he had the idea that something like Salesforce could be disrupted, because the big pain in Salesforce is actually setting up your schema and deciding what fields and what you need in each field. He envisions something where instead that you just have something where salespeople just send emails to an email address, and then an LLM are converting into structured data in the back end, and now it's easier system to use.
I'm sorry Tom, maybe it's me, but I don't have a good.
No, you're going a little bit in and out of reception. It's true. Yeah.
No,
Oh,
you-
really?
yeah.
Okay. Let me switch off my and go to here. Hold on. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Yeah. Hey, sorry. So I was just picking up on some of the things that you said, Ivan, about the structured and unstructured data, and I wondered if you thought that this is an opportunity potentially for companies like Salesforce to be disrupted by startups that will come along and say, okay, you don't need to set up your schemas, you don't need to spend a lot of time deciding exactly what your data structure is going to be. You just have your salespeople enter the meeting notes and have the LLM convert that to structured data in the back end, and it all kind of works magically. So a lot of the invested time and effort that people have put into creating these structures within their business logic might in fact be made redundant.
Wow, it's a super interesting question. Thank you for asking. What we can see, every company has this issue, and behind the Salesforce is the question of the data quality. It's very difficult to extract, put the data at the right place to leverage later. And we can see that LLM, every company, us including, we are looking at LLM, so how we can put that in our product to fix these kinds of issue. So I think, yes, this is an opportunity. Now, realistically, if you look at the size of the technology you need, the level of cash you need to invest in the infrastructures, this is my opinion, I do believe that the giant will start to leverage and it will be easier for them to set up the environment to include that in their products. But yes, I think it's going to change the way we operate. For example, for CRM, the knowledge customers, like, yes, we have the transcript, we put it, and we will ask the information to do those manual tasks. Anytime you sit when you have a meeting with your customers and you're taking notes about all these elements and you try to fulfill that in the notes in the CRM, yes, the LLM can simplify that and maybe extract things and say, okay, we have found relevant insight about this opportunity of investment, this opportunity of advice. So yes, that's a very good point. It will help to change another aspect of the job.
I think I agree. So the opportunities, of course, are there. As in, could this disrupt Salesforce? Yes, but then again, going a level down, the answer would be, what would it take? And that will be, it's quite expensive. I think that's what Ivan would say. It would be quite expensive to do that. So what's more likely to happen is that a player in the field, Salesforce, or another player, obviously, Microsoft, right? Even in their Office apps, they will integrate some of this technology so that it becomes less relevant as it pertains to data capture, for example, what the format of data really is, right? Because they just can, it becomes less of a thing, and an LLM specialized model that categorizes data can suck in any type of data and do that. And I think that's more likely to happen than like an independent firm, or I don't know, a corporate firm just say, you know what, let's just develop our CRM and replace us. That would be expensive. But I think it brings brings an interesting point, because in my day, data capture, data classification, it's a thing. If we can leverage some of the technology, not to, for example, replace Salesforce, but actually to solve some of the data problems that we've got, how we capture data, how we classify, that becomes interesting, right? And whether we use our proprietary, LLM models to do that, or off the shelves, that yet to be seen. But it brings in an interesting proposition to, a problem that is forever ongoing on our side, which is classification of data, capturing it, especially as you move into products that I look after, more OTC, where data is thin and fully unstructured. Applying those things to classify, saving it, mining it, I think that's interesting.
You're raising so many interesting points. Just to comment, yes, I think the LLM will be democratized through the large organization like Microsoft that will democratize them through their tools. And the thing is, when everybody has the same LLM in the same tools, the value will come about your ability to enrich it with your own data. And so at the end, the differentiation won't come about the ability and the access to the LLM. It will be your ability to leverage your own accurate data into the system to differentiate against your competitors. And then it's come about how LLM can help me to get better data inside my company. And this is the kinds of experimentation we're doing, how by including LLM in our data platform. And I've got a customers on corporate finance was looking to move his analytics backend into Snowflake, how we can help them to classify an ESG, for example, with what's coming with CSRD and all the classification of the activity. LLM could have a very big part to play in this classification of data and automation of data classification, which is already still the wild, wild west.
Super interesting.
Yes.
Should we touch, we got still time, but should we touch a little bit as to what we high level talked about it? But so obviously I think these are the opportunity, which is good. And I think the answer is basically almost whatever takes your fancy, but it has to be targeted because it's expensive anyway, at least for now. Yeah. Should we talk about some of the risks that we see short term, slightly long term too, and also what, some ideas of mitigating those perhaps? I'm certainly facing a bunch of, so I think that's probably an interesting thing to discuss.
Sure, sounds good.
Sure.
Yep. Who wants to go first? I mean, I think I'll go first. I think for us, is data leak, right? How do you make sure, depending on the architecture that you run your LLM into, and also what LLM models you use, how do you make sure that your data doesn't leak, right? And what you have there. And for sure, 100%, I think, Ivan mentioned IP, right? As you train data, how can you really make sure that you're not infringing any IP? And eventually that also your IP is not infringed. But I think from our perspective is more, at least for now, how do you make sure that you're not breaking any IP?
On that one, do you see that as different to, I can remember because the platform that I built was cloud-based. My company's product was cloud-based. And we started that in 2011 when, a lot of people either, couldn't or wouldn't trust anything that was cloud-based within the financial services industry. And by about 2014, 15, that had kind of become a non-issue. And people knew the questions to ask, and all of the due diligence questionnaires ended up kind of looking the same, and you had your standard answers. Do you think we're going to go through something similar with this, or is it fundamentally different to that?
I think for sure. I mean, stuff is relatively new, right? So I think the time frame it plays a part, right? I can make sure within that short time frame of deploying GPT or an LLM like model that you have those checks. I think it also comes with what architecture you're choosing to deploy, right? ChatGPT comes in a little bit more of a packaged architecture, right? Which might be different than your own choice. I don't know, if someone uses Amazon, for example, and deploying an LLM there and quote unquote still being in the cloud, but more controlled because it would be your own cloud. So I think those are things that, perhaps the fact that everything is happening relatively fast and as you say, with time going by, maybe the data leakage becomes less of an issue, especially if you can get comfortable in utilizing potentially a prepackaged architecture that might not be aligned with your own choice. i.e., I'm on Amazon, but I want to use ChatGPT because I want to give it to all my analysts, but I got to use it with Azure, for example. That's different, right? How do I get comfortable with that? I think that comes with time. I agree. Yeah. Ivan, I don't know, what do you think? What do you see there as well from some of the clients?
One break, which is much more human behavior, is the fact that this is the level of the maturity and the expectation of the technology. I use this analogy to my team. I say, if you have a time machine and you time travel to the Middle Age and you have a light torch, they will accuse you of magic that burn you. When today, even your 5-year or your 8 years boy understand that it works with electricity and things like this. LLM is exactly the same. It's a kind of magical, people think it's a brain, it can. So there is also a bias about other expectation of what the technology can bring, what it can do, and on which timeline. Back to what you said, both of you, about the maturity. Now, once that's for the human part. From the technology part, I do agree with you on the 2 keys, which is the leakage. Things are going better. Second thing is IP. Third is accuracy. And the accuracy raised the point of, for my use cases, do I do a delegate to the LLM the decision or the advice? If I delegate the fact that I built an insight that's used by a human to make the decision, okay, it's acceptable and we can go fast. If we're thinking about, can I delegate the trade and allocation directly to an LLM, this is another discussion. And so then comes the question about accuracy, repeatability, understanding, prediction of the model, which add an additional complexity, a layer of complexity from a technical standpoint, because the technology is not ready yet to answer those questions.
That's really well put. I love the idea that anytime anybody asks whether it can really think or it's conscious, we just all shout witchcraft, because that's about the level of that, I think. And I think it's also interesting. It gives much more insight, I think, into how humans think, to watch their responses to this. The privileged folk such as ourselves, are worried or seem to worry about it, destroying things, whereas, people who are blind or, disabled are just hopeful that it might actually help them browse the web more efficiently or, get around every day. The truth is obviously someplace in the middle.
Yeah, it definitely is, right. And I think what will be important, I think, in the context of regulation, and this is probably a little less specific to our field, but the broad regulation on LLM, I think, slow it down a little bit. That's basically what pretty much across the board, the industries, what industries are kind of saying, slowing down a little bit for a pause for some further thoughts as to how we want to proceed. It's good, because these things do have the power to expedite processes or areas much more faster, and therefore those capabilities, which we are kind of maybe now just scratching the surface, might be bigger than what we currently have now. Which means that with bigger capabilities, you might have bigger risks as well. I think that's an intrinsic, element there. And so, how do we overall then really regulate safe use of AI and LLM? I think that will be a question, because for sure, 100%, there's many advantages. In the medical fields, for example, with the same currency, there could be many disadvantages if LLM is misused, right? For, I don't know, financial crime or whatever that might be. So I think it is important to think about also from a smaller perspective, what are the actual risks that I'm facing whilst I'm implementing some of these use cases. But from a regulator perspective, where do I want to get to, right? How do I want to encourage safe use of this technology, which has the potential to be quite powerful, but and I want to unlock that, but I want to unlock it just for the good guys type of thing, right?
I think what Ivan said speaks to that. Actually, I think that he put it beautifully, that you need to make a decision whether you're delegating the decision or the advice.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And frankly, before LLMs were ever a thing, we've had problems, actual problems with people in the UK losing their homes because a mortgage provider didn't have a human in the loop, and they were relying
Yeah.
on their IT systems to, automate the decision process. And, these poor people were phoning up for months and couldn't actually get to speak to somebody. And I think, the regulator would do well just to impose that rule that, if you're providing certain classes of services and you're big enough, then you should not be allowed to delegate the decision to that degree, whether it's with an LLM or otherwise.
Yeah, so I think from this perspective, call to the regulators to be plugged in. I think it's an important subject to regulation doesn't happen fast enough. This is a field that is fast moving, but being involved and plugged in from now will allow then regulation from wherever it comes to apply the right frameworks. I think that's the game.
Mm-hmm.
And that's exactly what I'm saying. I'm working on experimentation with the bank, buy side, sell side asset managers. But their question is, okay, how far can I go? And I ask to the regulators, and the regulators is not ready yet. It's roughly, we have rules, it's up to you, and it's a chicken and eggs. Who is going to regulate so I can work on this and roll out? The big beers, and we don't talk, but this is the question of ethics. And we're starting to decide. You mentioned this loan and this automated allocation of loans, and it drives to some very bad situation for people. We had exactly the same discussion with the customers in the building industry, in the construction industry, named Eiffage in France. And they started to do that on the accident, how we can leverage the LLM to evaluate and machine learning in general to reduce the number of accidents we have when we're building a tower or whatever. And they say, okay, how much is trained my model? Because I've got two results, or I have 100% of the accident spotted. So I have no accidents, but I've got 500 false positive, which means from the economical standpoint, it's not affordable. I cannot mobilize teams to go on the construction place anytime I've got a false positive. Or I tune my models, I just have 1 out of 3 incidents detected, but it's efficient it's affordable from an economic standpoint. Should I use my ML to predict all the accidents, or shouldn't I make it economically reasonable? And this is a human decision, because the algorithm is called. It just gives you what we put in the inside. It asks the company, it's the same for the automatic cars for Google. If I have an accident and I can kill an old guy or a young boy, what should I put as a priority in my algorithms? So there's also a lot of questions coming back about, if I delegate a decision to the machines, what are the rules? Then it's a human discussion. Same for the trade. If tomorrow you delegate a trade, what's the impact of the economy if all the algorithms in any part of the organization start to trade the wrong way on wrong hypotheses, and that can rules or can break down the system? So, and this is the kinds of question they're also expecting from the regulators to rules. To which extent can we use that, and can we use that especially on the decision side? Yeah,
that's why from one perspective, our industry is being heavily regulated. I think has, from that perspective, an advantage, as in some of these things, some of these questions, of course, they'll have to be addressed also from different angles, but I've been asked before, right, with algo trading or in oversights of advisory. So for once, I think that really plays to our advantage. For once, I say, because often we've debated that regulation has been not as fast-paced as we would want. I think the game though will be that, right, making sure that the regulator is thinking about these problems right now, right, and applying frameworks that already exist, right, obviously tweaking them for some of the applications of AI and LLM that might be here. But I think we've got many regimes that can play really to our advantage, and I think that's a good thing.
Oh, yeah. I think you spotted exactly the right thing, and the very pragmatical one. It's like the DMA. What is not allowed in the real life is not allowed on internet. So you need to apply the rules. That should be the same in the investment, tweaking it, adapted to the situation, but that should be the same. And following these guidelines, we can leverage, if we balance the risk and the benefits, that will be exactly the same things that as today.
Yeah, I'd strongly agree with that.
Very good point.
Yeah, I strongly agree with that as well. I think that anytime a new technology like this comes along, you know, people get a bit histrionic and say that we need brand new regulations. But I think if we've got good regulations and we characterize the new technology properly, then it's pretty obvious what needs to happen.
Yeah, I agree. And I think then at that point, the focus becomes, you know, if you got good regulatory regime, you apply the technology safely so that, you know, you're confident that you know, data is not leaking, that you're not breaking an IP. Then the focus really is on how can I integrate this tech to solve, you know, good problems, and co-piloting my analysts in you know, deck presentations instead of having them doing that until late at night. They focus on other IPs. I think that's the game, at least that I see playing in our world.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think, you know, personal productivity is definitely the most obvious immediate impact, and I've experienced that personally, and you know, so have a lot of people I've spoken to, and that's kind of incontrovertible. I think that in terms of impact on jobs, that is an interesting thing in that, let's say, a software developer who uses these tools can potentially be twice as productive at a conservative estimate. Now that doesn't mean that you get away with not hiring one extra person. You probably get away with not hiring 2 extra people, because you know, if you add 2 extra people to a team of 1, then you don't get, you know, you about get double the productivity. And particularly with, you know, developers who are experts in the domain, then they can achieve a lot more, and potentially much more than 2x productivity gains. So that's kind of an interesting one, but I don't think that results in, you know, large swathes of jobs being eliminated, because I think there's a lot more code out there to be written, you know, orders of magnitude than we can imagine, usefully written than we currently have. And we'll just find, you know, new ideas for applications that we haven't yet built, or be more ambitious about the applications we undertake.
That's super interesting, because it raised me an analysis that we read with the customers on this. We forget about one core things that we need to mention about LLM, which is parts of generative AI. So the thing of generative AI is it cannot create. So what they are doing is based on the information they have, they generate something based on that. A lot of time people think that it is creative AI. It is not. So when you want to do an insight, whatever the quality and the accuracy of the insight will only be the result of the data you fulfill. So if you want to create something new, different, or something which is not in a document or a feeling, you cannot materialize that. So that's important also in the risk, to understand the limit of what is generative AI and what it can put. It can simplify, automate, reduce times, but it cannot create. We have observed that also on the code. You mentioned the code. We've seen that the code generated is just a reproduction of things that have worked in the past. But when you have a new problem, or you want to envision the problem with a new angle, you need to redesign things. You have what have exist, but you need to create something, and Gen AI cannot. And you also need to review the code. And I read an analysis, a deep analysis of this, and they said, if you want the LLM to as of today, if you want them to generate the right level of quality of code you expect, the way you ask the question and you put it in the prompt will strongly determine the output.
Yeah.
So you need to understand how the LLM, the algorithm, is working and analyzes to generate, to formulate your question in the right way. So it's not yet today, as of today, a magic tools. You still need some expertise to
prompt engineering. Prompt engineering will become, I'm sure there will be soon quite a lot of courses focusing on prompt engineering. I think I agree with you guys. Like, we've seen this before, right? In other technological advances. A lot of people used to farm a lot more in the past, and now there's fewer because we moved to other type of jobs, right? And I think this is my view is that this is the case. Like, there will be a shift for sure in productivity. So I do agree that when the use cases are applied well and targeted, the productivity gains are huge, right? I do think, however, that people are still needed, and so they'll evolve. And so I'm serious in saying prompt engineering will become a thing, and so you'll see quite a lot of coders that will focus on that, right? You're not losing them; you're just moving them into something else that is even more specialized. So from that perspective, I too, I'm relatively optimistic on, what it really means in terms of people working in the industry. I think it'll just force, quote unquote, people to move the value chain and be more specialized.
Mm-hmm. I think just on the prompt stuff and picking up also on some of the stuff that Ivan said, one of the kind of eureka moments that I had early on playing with ChatGPT for code generation was to feed it a coding standards document, which, if you think about it, that's the prompt that your firm used to give its own coders, right? Would say, a set of rules for how you should write your functions and how you should name things. And actually then, the code that it generated was more or less compliant with those coding standards, and therefore, far more useful. But it is surprising how many people who use ChatGPT in particular don't fully appreciate the value of giving a longer prompt and giving examples. So I think that we are probably way ahead, and we probably overestimate how much utility people can get out of this thing out of the box. It's a little bit like, back in the day, people not knowing that you can use Google search for multiple keywords at the same time, and of course, the more tech savvy people take that for granted, but it's not something that's very obvious to, generally well-educated, intelligent people. And that's why I think that firms like Microsoft in particular, and Google, providing the Office tools suite, stand to capture the most value out of all of this, because they have the opportunity.
Integrated.
Yeah, it's integrated. They already have all of your emails. They already have all of your documents, and they can customize it, exactly to your tone. And that's not something that the typical person is going to have the time, the inclination, or the expertise to engineer themselves.
And it's back, I think it's a good point. It's circle back with what you mentioned, Sarta, about what are the short terms. And what we observe is also be educated on the field of possible, because it's so expensive. You can have the tunnel effect. So our recommendation to the customers is, if you're not yet ready, first try to consider the LLM and the Gen AI available in your tool. Copilot in Office, Copilot in GitHub. It's a good way to start to educate yourself on this. Then the next step could be how you can build something based on platform available on the cloud, where you don't have to handle the whole infrastructures, model design, and start to continue your journey. And then you can think, if you need it, to have your own infrastructures. Because as JP Morgan's, you've got the structures, the research to invest and to have experts in the right levels. But you are middle size or tier 3, tier 4.
It's expensive, of course. Yeah.
You cannot afford that. So you need to be wise about how you're going to engage your journey on studying and on integrating the technology. And that's a major trap.
A great point. I made it before, right? Indeed, we're large and we have the capabilities. At the same time, we need to be also obviously cognizant of the spend and where we apply this for, right? We've got investors to be that we are accounted to. So even from our perspective, we're quite aware of and I was saying earlier, right? Do I need to go after this use case that is being addressed pretty well by some time with this type of ML approach? Do I just need to deploy LLM here? Does it make sense? It's super expensive. I want to experiment, but I want to be I want to be self-aware of the costs. So maybe there's something else that I can experiment with that I can achieve with this other fully optimized, efficient, and cost-efficient model. I do understand that that's even more of a an important choice to make for smaller firms or smaller players, definitely.
Yeah. Gentlemen, I apologize because I've got a meeting in 1 minute and I didn't see the time pass. It was really fascinating discussion.
It was a great discussion, and I think even if we just rerun that at the conference, it'd be very interesting. So thank you very much for joining. I will get in touch with you later today once we have worked out what we're doing regarding a moderator. And so thank you for your kind offer to step in. I'll be in touch.
Thank you, Amy.
And possibly we'll try and get everybody together for half an hour on Monday once we've got the moderator in place, just to have a final discussion and work out exactly how we're going to run the session.
Sounds good.
Perfect. Thanks a lot.
Cheers, guys.
In touch.
Thanks a lot.
It was a pleasure.
Thank you. Bye-bye.